Oil markets aren't strangers to uncertainty, but 2025 feels like it's testing the limits of chaos. Brent crude hovers around $66 a barrel. Not a collapse, but far from a catalyst for a worldwide resurgence. U.S. oil rigs have dropped to 473, signaling caution and discipline from companies that not so long ago appeared to be championing aggressive growth. For years, the story was about rapid expansion, but now the priority seems to have shifted to deliberate strategic moves. The headlines don't help. One day it's OPEC Plus ramping up production, the next it's demand forecasts trimming expectations or capital budgets getting slashed. Saudi Arabia announced $600 billion in infrastructure investments in the U.S. The UAE follows with $1.4 trillion of commitment, and Qatar ups the LNG game with billions in spending. But how much of these headlines translate into real action? How many projects pivot if politics shift? If AI disrupts supply chains or if market volatility continues? The context is increasingly complex. But this much is clear. The industry's old playbook is crumbling. If you're operating on last year's assumptions, well, you're already behind. For decades, upstream oil and gas thrived on opacity. Power came from gatekeeping and hoarding data from the black box that only a few could penetrate. But those days are looking like they may just be over. The rise of AI and real-time transparency has obliterated the shadows, along with the geopolitics. Reservoir models now can update in minutes. Deals that once took months to close are maybe closing in days. The winners are those who can synthesize fast and act even faster, not the ones clinging to the outdated comfort of secrecy and control. But the clarity can be unsettling. Transparency cuts both ways. It doesn't just reveal opportunities, it exposes vulnerabilities. If your culture punishes dissent or stifles adaptation, these changes won't work in your favor. AI doesn't solve problems on its own, it magnifies what's already there. Strengths become sharper, weaknesses more glaring. The true advantage lies in using technology to foster curiosity and collaboration, not to entrench in the old silos. Now, geopolitically, the stakes are escalating. The Red Sea checkpoints are becoming black holes for supply chain uncertainty. The comfortability myth of frictionless global energy flows has vanished. Over in Latin America, nationalization threats are looming, while OPEC flexes its muscles as U.S. shale growth plateaus. If the previous decade was about scale, this one is about agility. Success no longer belongs to the largest reserves or the deepest pockets. It's about optionality. Who can localize, and who can pivot and adapt their operations fastest. This isn't just a market trend, it's a deeper reckoning. The persistent myth that more technology, more capital, more scale will always deliver more profit is collapsing under its own weight. The world is waking up to a realization that the late economist E.F. Schumacher highlighted decades ago in Small is Beautiful, Economics as if People Mattered. Finite resources can't be treated as infinite income streams. Treating oil as a perpetual revenue stream is not resilience, it's recklessness. The real question isn't how much more we can pump, but how quickly we can evolve our business models to thrive on the concept of enough. This brings me to a memory from the early days of my career. Back when I was a Young engineer, I stumbled into an influential role advising a large public company. I was running 5 computers nonstop to model every well in North America. It was a tedious job. It was exhilarating, and then I felt like I was, in the middle of something big, including, inching toward answers that no one had fully articulated at that time. Yet, at that time, personal computers were just becoming introduced to professionals like me. One day, I was tweaking some data sets and forecast and piecing together some projections, and an executive, a high-ranking executive, walked up to me and leaned over my desk and kind of half joked. He said, "Don't tweak that model too much, or you'll make it fit what it looks like the headlines are saying on the front page." And then he laughed at his own quip, kind of scoffing at the idea that market headlines didn't really matter all that much to our work. At that time, I just chuckled and carried on. But a few years later, the joke wasn't funny anymore. That same company nearly went under, blindsided by a series of market swings and public narratives that they hadn't taken seriously enough. Headlines did matter in the end. Markets do move fast enough for them to steer outcomes on the scale. If you're not paying attention, by the time the reality reaches you, it may be too late. Still, there's a truth underlying that cautionary tale. Headlines may shape markets, but the ripple effect spreads unevenly. The high-level movers and shakers may feel insulated and behind their ivory tower projections and strategies, but the reality does hit differently in the oil field towns. Out there, where workers try to balance uncertain shifts when feeding their families, confusion isn't abstract. It's real, it's palpable, and it creates worry and doubt. And that part of it becomes part of daily life. The local grocery store doesn't float on speculative sentiment. It operates on the hard numbers of wages earned and spent. The contrast is important. Its space is where the decisions made in boardrooms clash with the realities lived on the ground. Affluent bubbles and narratives fueled by cheap money or funny money can't insulate communities forever. Not when the elastic nature of speculation snaps back. At some point, the system forces a reckoning. At some point, the funny money fades, and what remains are the undeniable practical realities of sustaining life and industry. Not future headlines, but the tangible realities of today. For all the technical education drilled into us in this industry and like in engineering school, patience was never part of the curriculum. We were taught to act, to predict, to solve. But what about enduring? What about framing strategy for survival amid swirling chaos? That dissonance I see in the markets mirrors something broader. Humanity is collective mind space is cluttered with a conflicting narrative. Wars, AI advancements, fintech revolutions, monetary policy, social unrest. We're drowning in chatter. It brings me back to another point of clarity from a professor who often drank coffee spiked with a little bit of whiskey. He said, when things get messy, he told us, it's not about perfect answers. It's about stepping back to find out what's real. Be ready to improvise, he said. Well, that's the challenge now, to pause, take a step back, and resist being swept up by every speculative headline or announcement. For companies, it's about building grounded strategies that prioritize what's real. For individuals, it's about recalibrating how we see ourselves in the system and trusting our observations over distractions thrown at us. The markets will stabilize, the noise will fade, but the energy sector's survival depends on adaptability, not fueled by fear, but shaped by patience and clarity. The temporary highs of speculation will always fade back to the hard truths that communities and industries face. Endure the noise, trust yourself, and stay ready for when the grounded reality finally settles. This is Future Wise Energy. I'm Mark Roach. And as always, the question isn't just about what's next, it's about where you stand when the dust finally clears.